Hello? That was a great California welcome for the Clintons. Obviously, we're all thrilled that you're here. I just want to say right off the bat that I've known Bill and Hillary for 25 years because my wife, Mary Steenburgen, grew up in North Little Rock and became well known as an actor about the same time you were first term governor, I believe, and I've heard all the stories of sitting on the kitchen counters talking about the future, and she's so sorry that she's not here, couldn't be here, but she sends much love. But this is family. Mary was given away at our wedding by Bill because her father passed away years before that. So I just want to say to the two of you, though, that I love you both so much and I respect you so much. It is a joy for me to sit up here. This is my first time to moderate anything, so bear with me.
You're in a good place.
Yeah. That's how you can tell the ratings, by who chaired the better. But bear with me, because I am an actor, and this is a stage, so I'll try to throw focus your way every once in a while. All right. Yes. All right, you've been here in California many, many times, but what do you love about our great state of California?
What is not to love? I mean, there are so many things that I personally love, and I know Bill has the same reaction to California. But I have to say, in addition to, all of the obvious things about California, I've always loved California because it is about the best of our future. When you look at California, you look at the diversity, you look at the way that people come here seeking opportunity from literally everywhere. It's an exciting place to be. From all of my experiences, the first time I came to California was so many years ago with my late mother, because she had grown up in California, in the San Gabriel Valley, in a place called Alhambra. And ever since I was a little girl, she would tell me what it was like growing up in California in those days, and how beautiful it was, and how there were orange groves everywhere, and you could take a streetcar from where she was actually down to the Pacific Ocean. She just painted a picture of the beauty and the extraordinary feeling that California gave her. And so I've always felt a really big part of that feeling is in my own heart, because I have so many friends here, I've had so many good times here, but it's about the future. It's about the kind of place that it is.
Bill, I think you have a story about, I just interrupted the President of the United States.
I love California for personal reasons and for sort of philosophical reasons. And I've always loved campaigning here because I get to see them both. That is, this is a place that is the epitome of what I think is the future. Inclusive tribalism, not divisive tribalism. And people think of California as whatever they think of it, they don't know. But it's basically just literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of discrete communities, even within big cities. I remember going to a rally for Hillary in 2016, and I got there and the mayor says, we have the highest percentage of Japanese Americans in any city in America. Just for example. And it was a small town, maybe 30,000 or something. And I think California has always been able to be a tomorrow place because everybody knows that you can have a place here. You can be accepted for who you are, and you've got a chance to really imagine a different future. And I think that's important. I like it, 'cause the first time I ever came here, my uncle owned a Buick dealership in Arkansas, and I just turned 20, and I went with a guy I grew up with whose mother worked for him, and we flew out here on the discount youth fair to pick up a Buick that this lady wanted to buy, and he could only find it here. And I got to drive across, so I got to see California. Then Hillary, when we started going together, had a summer job in California, so I drove her out here. And I missed her, so I came back. And then we went to, we camped out at a national park. And our second anniversary, yeah, look at that. That's the Mustang convention. You like my Mustang?
Yeah.
We spent our second anniversary in Northern California, and we went way north of San Francisco and Oakland. And I remember we were running out of real estate, and I didn't know where the heck we were going. It gets pretty, you might as well be in the Ozarks once you get out there, you know. And so we spent the night in a place called the Botel. It was a motel on the highway shaped like a boat. You remember that? And there was a little lake nearby, and there we were in all our glory at the Botel. So we love it here. But I love it now because you prove over and over and over every single day that diverse groups and inclusive politics and feelings result in better decisions and brighter futures than homogenous groups and arrogant divisiveness.
I wish my wife Mary were sitting here. It doesn't feel right to be sitting talking to you without her sitting here, but one of the bonds that the four of us share is our attachment to our families. Constantly amazes us that you raised such a lovely, kind daughter in such a challenging environment. And I was just wondering, did you and the other First Families talk together about the challenges of raising children in the White House?
Yes. You know, Chelsea was born when Bill was governor of Arkansas in 1980, and so she was born into a political public family, but there was nothing at all like what you experience when you run for and are elected president. So when we were in Arkansas, you know, we would drive her to school every day. I would pick her up and take her to ballet lessons or over to a friend's house. It was just all much more normal. And so when Bill got elected, and I had to start thinking about how do you try to provide something resembling a normal life to your child, I reached out and I got really, really good advice from Jacqueline Kennedy. I found her to be so supportive. I remember I went and met with her. She was living in New York at the time. And she was talking about how hard she worked to make sure that her children, John and Caroline, were given as, quote, normal a life as possible until the, tragic assassination of their father. And even then, back in private life, she tried to do it. And she told me stories about how, they had chores to do, and she was always, very encouraging of them to, just get out and play with other kids and, have the experiences that, you're supposed to have growing up. So I really always was grateful to Jackie because of the advice that she gave me. And then, fast forward, when a new president's been elected, the tradition is that, the incoming first lady, someday first man, but the incoming first lady usually comes to the White House and is hosted by the outgoing first lady. So when George W. Bush won, I hosted Laura Bush, and and you know, her kids were older, but they were still going to be given a level of exposure that they had never had before, even though he'd been governor of Texas. And then fast forward, when Barack Obama was running for president, he and Michelle would, you know, ask me, well, what was it like raising Chelsea, because their two girls were young. And it's one of those areas that regardless of your party or your partisanship, you really want to do the best you can to make sure your child or children are not going to be adversely affected. So I remember talking, you know, to Michelle and talking about, you know, the kinds of things, having their friends over. You know, Chelsea always had her friends over at the White House, having little parties, having slumber parties, you know, anything that was more in line with what would have been happening had they not been living in the White House. And so, yeah, it's always somewhat daunting to think about having that experience and wanting it to be good for your child and knowing that there's all kinds of other stuff that goes with it. But so I'm grateful to the people who gave me advice, and I appreciated being asked when it was somebody else's turn.
One thing we did with Chelsea when we were still in Arkansas, and we started when she was 6 years old, because she was already reading newspapers. She started reading the newspaper when she was 5. She wanted to know what was going on. She knew that somehow we had something to do with the newspaper. And she went to school, and I asked her what her father did for a living, and he said that he drinks coffee, makes speeches, and talks on the phone. But Hillary and I, there were 3 of us, and so in 1986, when I was running for re-election, 2 former governors were running against me, both way to the right of me and attacking me for everything I'd ever done. And I knew Chelsea was just beginning to be old enough to understand that. And she would hear terrible things said about her father, and they were against our education reform program, and Hillary had spearheaded that. So she was probably going to hear some things about her mother. And so we would take turns playing each of those 3 candidates. And Chelsea played me one day, and Hillary and I played the 2 ex-governors running against me. And we were trying to rough her up. And by the time she got through with us, I knew what to say in the next debate. But the point is, as Hillary always says, you have to teach people to learn to take criticism seriously, but not personally. Yeah. And if you take it too personally, 1, it will make you miserable, and 2, you won't be able to take it seriously. Whereas if you can take it seriously and then analyze, is it better or not, you can keep from going stark raving nuts in this crazy business. So I think the other thing I think is important to do is to show up. I know people talk about quality time, but my experiences from our limited experience of our unlimited daughter is she knew if we couldn't do something because we had to miss it. And she was perfectly aware of what an optional miss was. And kids do keep score. And so I think if they're taking a lot of flack in effect for you, which they are, if you're in public life, you know, that's what I thought about, you know, my daughter. She has resisted the temptation to basically say, look at all the crap I've taken for you and Mom for so years, so would you please do X or Y or Z? But if they're doing it, it's important to show up.
While we're on the subject of Chelsea, our granddaughters really loved Chelsea's book, She Persisted. So, here's my question. You have a granddaughter and a grandson and another one on the way? Yeah? So, how does one find the balance between helping girls to feel empowered without making boys feel left out of that encouragement?
You know, Ted, that is a really important question because just to say something about Chelsea's book. It's called, the first one was called She Persisted, and the second one, She Persisted Around the World, and she took the lives of women who achieved something against great odds. And it was inspired by the incredible behavior of Mitch McConnell toward Elizabeth Warren. And when Elizabeth Warren was reading Coretta Scott King's letter on the floor of the Senate opposing Jeff Sessions' nomination as Attorney General, McConnell went to the floor and told her to cease. And I was in the Senate for 8 years. I never saw that happen to anybody. And when Senator Warren tried to go on, McConnell ordered her off the floor because he had told her to stop, but nevertheless she persisted. And that just absolutely outraged Chelsea. And so when she got this idea about how she wanted to highlight women who persisted, she, contacted Senator Warren, asked if it would be okay with her. She said, obviously, something Mitch McConnell had said about her, and if we could turn it on its head, that would be a positive. So there is still a great need to encourage young girls, to encourage young women to follow their dreams, to be as confident as they possibly can, to take on whatever the challenges are that they think will give them a sense of purpose and meaning and happiness in their lives. And I have spent much of my adult life doing that. And so I'm proud of the work that Chelsea has done to make that happen. But the second part of your question is also really important, because there is something happening in many places in the world with boys and men. And I don't pretend to understand it, but I'll give you just a quick story. I was in Norway recently, and I was having dinner with a group of leading public officials, politicians, intellectuals. And you think of Norway being this nirvana place, which in many ways it is. And yet when I said to them, I said, so if you're looking down the road, what are the problems? And they said things like climate change, the nature of work. They said things that didn't surprise me. And then they said, the future of boys. And I said, what do you mean? And they said, well, take Norway, which is a country that tries to provide equal opportunity for everybody. Boys are dropping out of school at a higher rate. Boys are not going on to higher education at a higher rate. And so all of a sudden the Norwegians are saying, there's something happening in advanced countries, advanced societies, about what's going on with boys. I had never really heard that addressed before. So your question's incredibly on point and very timely, because we have to continue to encourage our girls, but we also maybe have to start thinking more creatively about how to encourage our boys so that they are part of this inclusive, positive, optimistic, dream-based world that we want to build for all of our children. And so it deserves some serious thought. And I hope that, if there are people in this audience who've given some thought to that, you will try to think, how do we make sure that while we're encouraging our girls, we use whatever techniques and approaches are necessary to also encourage our boys? Because at the end of the day, we want healthy, happy, productive kids who become good citizens, who help us build the kind of future that we want for the next generation.
I agree with that. That's the secret to a happy marriage. Let me say something serious about it. I've thought about this a lot, because I was raised by a widowed mother and a grandmother who worked from the time I was young, and my grandfather died younger than she did. When I married Hillary, it was about 10% of the Arkansas bar were women. And I was always proud to try to advance these causes. But here's how I think you ought to think of it. My short answer to what you all were just talking about is that kids notice things by category quicker than we think. I mean, think about your life. Think of all of your lives. The establishment of identity and the organization of reality requires categories. Boy, girl, up, down, thin, not thin, gray hair, brown hair, you know, it requires categories. So the trick is, and we're constantly then having to change our categories, particularly in this huge, wonderful transformation we've been going through with gender identity. Like, as quick as we get to one category, we have to broaden it or change it or another. But the point is, but we still want categories. We got to have some place to put things in our brain, right? So when all these young boys start seeing these changes, and maybe in Norway it's the same, I know what's happened in the heartland where I'm from, they start seeing these older men without a lot of education who don't want to move from where they've been living and can't get a very good job where they are. All these things, they're not just individual stories, they crash the categories. So I tell you what I think is important. If my grandchildren were not who they are, and I took Chelsea's books home, she persisted, I would show my very smart grandson this story, and I would say, Aiden, this is a really important story because your grandmother was Secretary of State and a senator, and she ran for president. But we never had a woman president, and we haven't had as many women senators or secretaries of state as men. So we've got to tell young girls, never get discouraged. But I want you to understand, you have an equal shot at that, and you can't be discouraged either, and you still have to work for it. And you should never get anything that you're not willing to work for. But this is something that applies to you. In other words, you should start thinking of strategies to keep boys from feeling sort of reverse identity theft. You know, like because we shouldn't be binary in our thinking. We shouldn't be, well, if a girl wins, a boy loses, or if a man wins, a woman loses. We shouldn't be that way. But that requires a level of personal security and emotional as well as intellectual sophistication you've got to breed in. You've got to build that in children. And that's why I think Hillary and I are so proud of our daughter, who is on some scale of human development is probably 300,000 or 400,000 years ahead of us. But it's an important thing. And I think we need to be out there pulling for these boys. A lot of them don't know, come here from Sikkim, as we used to say at home, when it comes to how to deal with all these currents sweeping through life. But we got to tell men in no uncertain terms to stop acting like it's a zero-sum game. Don't whine around. If a woman finally gets an even chance and wins an even fight, you should celebrate that. And if you want to, if that's an area that you want to play in, then work harder, suit up, and play on. I mean, but my point is, you gotta, if you don't talk about it, there will be adverse psychological consequences for a lot of people because we can't live without categories. We have to organize reality.
While we're on Chelsea, will you tell that story about her coming and asking advice about the Rhodes Scholarship?
You want me to tell it? I guess that's the proudest I ever was of our daughter. One night in the White House, Chelsea was at Stanford. Hillary had gone to bed. It was about 1 o'clock, and that's one of the reasons she should have been president. She gets a good night's sleep. And so the phone rings. It's like, I don't know, 12:30, 1:45, but it's 3 hours earlier out here, as you all know. And she was at Stanford, and I said, daughter, you're calling me kind of late. She said, you're up, aren't you? I said, yes. She said, look, Dad, I got to talk to you. I got good news and bad news. I thought I was going to hear a bad joke, you know. I said, well, what's the good news? She said, Stanford wants to nominate me for a Rhodes Scholarship. If you get into to get into the competition, your college has to nominate you, then you can run or you can compete either where you live. In our case, it was Arkansas or DC. She probably did either one, or where you go to school. So everybody prefers not to compete in California because there's more competitors. But anyway, she said they want to nominate me. I said, well, gosh, Chelsea, that's a great honor. I said, what could possibly be bad? She said, I don't want to do it. And I said, do you still want to go to Oxford when you get out? She'd been telling me that since she was a little girl, told Hillary. She said, yes. She said, I said, well, are you afraid or you don't want to do it because you're afraid you'll lose? She said, no, I think I would probably win. I said, and she was not being arrogant. She said, I think I probably would win. I said, do you not want to do it because you think you would win